Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the University Women's Club Lecture Series. I'm Janet Brewer, UWC President, and today's speakers, Christian Gardner-Wood and Lizbeth Parker, will be officially introduced shortly. But first, we will spend a few minutes on UWC-focused announcements. I would like to highlight our non-brunch opera event, which will take place on Sunday, March 14th at 12:30 via Zoom. Maestro Nicholas Carthy will speak about this year's CU opera production of Hansel and Gretel, and our members will be enabled to view an online performance of same at their convenience. Just a heads up, Daylight savings time begins on March 14th, so plan accordingly. Second, please save the date of Tuesday, April 13th at 11 a.m. for this year's scholarship celebration. It will be a great hour of good stories, and everyone is encouraged to come to Zoom with their favorite mask right in hand so that we can have a collective mask fashion show. Our theme is Unmasking the Future, providing opportunities and celebrating generosity. Please ask questions today by clicking on the QA to show the question box. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce Marge Riddle, who is the chair of our scholarship committee, and she has some great news for us today. Marge?
Yes, hello all. And I want to start off by saying you are all amazing and deserve congratulations. And now maybe you'd like to know why. This year, with all of our events in virtual format and our membership down a bit, we were concerned that our scholarship donations might decline. But the scholarship committee, who met last week to make final decisions about recipients, was told that the funds this year were even a bit more than last year's, and we could allocate $30,000. The committee was delighted as we felt that we had a particularly fine group of applicants this year, and we were able to choose 6 recipients again, who will be introduced to you at the virtual scholarship celebration on April 13th. So as Janet just said, mark your calendars. Right now, however, I want to briefly tell you about one of last year's recipients, Paula Chacon, whose picture you'll see, because she so well embodies the qualities we look for in our recipients. I could not do better than by repeating some of Paula's own words. In thanking us last year, Paula said, and I quote, "This is much more than I could have hoped for. With this scholarship, you are changing lives like mine. With this scholarship, you have inspired me, motivated me, and given me a push to keep going, to persevere and stay strong and believe that it is worth to dream big." Growing up was not always easy, and I have been going through many different challenges to be here today. Paula then went on to describe that she came from a low-income home in Bogota, where her parents were not home very much, since in her words, they had to work to bring food to our plate. Paula consequently took a major role in caring for younger siblings, including cooking meals and helping with homework. Paula is now studying marketing at CU, has hopes of pursuing an MBA, and to quote her again, says she hopes to work for a company that gives back to society and embraces care for the environment and the world. She further says that someday she hopes to be able to contribute to the people in need in Colombia and encourage youth to pursue their dreams, and goes on to say, "From the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you for this amazing opportunity." At the scholarship celebration in April, you will hear the stories of our current recipients. which I assure you will be equally heartwarming. So thank you all in advance for your continued generosity, which I know will be forthcoming. And now I will turn things over to Norma Portnoy, who will introduce today's speaker. Norma?
Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's lecture. So glad you're here. I want to thank our speakers today. This is such an important topic in terms of how to protect our money and our information. So Christian Gardner-Wood is Senior Deputy District Attorney for the Director of Community Protection and Legislative Affairs for the Boulder County District Attorney's Office. He oversees all prosecutions for elder abuse, significant financial fraud cases, and he coordinates the outreach policy and legislation for the office. Attorney Lizbeth Parker is a specialist for the Community Protection Division with the DA's office, and as such, she handles consumer complaints and reports of fraud and financial exploitation from community members. So thank you so much, and at this time, I'm going to turn it over to our speakers.
Norma, thank you so much for the introduction. I appreciate it. And thank you to you all for being a part of this presentation today and joining us. We're excited to do this presentation. As Norma indicated, I oversee our Community Protection Division, which means I oversee our financial fraud prosecutions and elder abuse prosecutions. But a large part of our Community Protection Division is prevention efforts. And I'd much rather have this kind of presentation and this conversation with you all up front from a preventative standpoint than talking to you as a victim having been scammed or had some sort of economic exploitation. So we really do appreciate you having us today and are excited for the presentation. What we want to focus on today is generally scams and frauds that we are seeing. What we know is that scammers are becoming increasingly sophisticated. We also know that scammers are aware of what's going on right now. So by that, I mean issues around COVID, issues around stimulus checks, issues around a vaccine. They understand that these are on people's minds and that people are going to be looking for information around some of this. So we're going to talk about some of the information that we know is coming out right now as it relates to COVID-19, but then also talk about some of the general scams that we see coming up regularly and that have been repeated historically over our years of seeing this. So we'll go through our presentation, and then at the end, we're going to leave time for questions and answers. We received some in advance, and we're excited to address those and also welcome any additional questions as we go throughout the presentation. So you see here is our first slide, and it's really kind of talking about COVID, as I suggested, because that's something that we know right now we're seeing. The scammers are following the headlines of 2020 and 2021. They know what people are concerned about. They know what people are looking for and thinking about, and they're using that to their advantage to scam people. So the other problem with that we know happened in 2020 is evidenced by this presentation. A lot of times I love coming to a room and meeting you all and talking with you all in person. But right now we can't do that, right? It's another consequence of COVID-19, and scammers are aware of that as well. So for example, a lot of us that maybe hadn't done online shopping before, or certainly, you know, a lot of folks will use Amazon for things here and there, but what we know is people are starting to use it for grocery shopping. They're doing more online banking and not going into their banks. They're looking for information around the vaccines or stimulus money. And so this increase in digital access, and which is new for some of us. I've never had so many Zoom presentations or meetings before, but we've had to make that transition. But as we've made that transition, so have the scammers as they recognize that they can gain access. So it's things around the online banking and those new opportunities that folks see around this. So for example, I want to talk for a second about the vaccines, and then next Liz is going to talk about stimulus money as it relates to the pandemic and funding from the federal government. with vaccines, what we're seeing is we're seeing folks that are reaching out and having folks sign up for fake vaccines. In fact, I talked with one of the panelists listed here as we were preparing for the presentation about 15 minutes ago as we were waiting to get started. And it happened to her husband, where people are looking to sign up for the vaccines. There's not many available. And then unfortunately, scammers are using that. There's multiple reasons they may be doing that. One is as simple as they want to get your personal information. They want to know your name. They may want to know your social security number. They may want to just find some basic information about you that they can then use for other purposes. So it may seem innocent enough to say, oh, I'm just giving my name to somebody or my date of birth to somebody, but that can then get you in the cycle of them using that for additional scams. The other thing we've seen around vaccines is asking for payment, payment to get a vaccine early, payment to put your name on the list, payment to be able to skip the line when you arrive at a facility for the vaccine. All of these are scams. When we're talking about the vaccines, you cannot buy them. They are being distributed by the federal and state governments through their public health departments, and they're being done at reputable places done by medical providers under the guidance of the public health department. So for example, as you know, we have the chart around, category 1, 1A, 1B, 1C, category 2, et cetera. Somebody that's a category 2 or category 3 in terms of getting the vaccine can't pay to jump the line, but we're seeing scammers do that. So those are the kind of the things that you need to look at, including the issue of, contract tracing. They're asking you to click on links, which we're going to talk about repeatedly. You got to be careful clicking on links, and you should never click on a link from somebody that you don't know or from something that is unsolicited. End of the day, nobody legitimate will call, text, or email you about the vaccine and ask for payment or social security number, bank account, credit card number, etc. For those purposes, which is important to think about right now as we're in the middle of getting the vaccines and hopefully at the tail end of this pandemic.
Yes, and we're going to spend a couple minutes talking about stimulus money scams that we saw certainly in the first 2 rounds of stimulus payments that were provided by our federal government in 2020, especially because there is now talk and bills moving through Congress about a 3rd round of payments. Things to be aware of here is how we might expect to get that payment, and then importantly, what the scammers are doing around the topic of stimulus money, or as the government calls them, economic impact payments. In the first round of money that was distributed by the federal government earlier in 2020, about 4 million of us received what you see here on the right, front and back, which were debit cards, which actually contained our stimulus money benefits. And we needed to activate those cards and then could spend them as we would money off of a debit card or deposit them into our bank accounts. The other ways that stimulus money has been distributed were by direct deposit, but only if we had already signed up for direct deposits for tax refunds in previous years. And then thirdly, there is, of course, the old-fashioned paper check from our United States Treasury Department, which was also a way that the federal government distributed stimulus money. And importantly, between that first round and that second round, the numbers of folks that got this Visa debit card that you see here on the right side of the screen doubled. It was about 4 million the first round and then 8 million the second round. So now that we're hearing about and our legislators are talking about a 3rd round, we can certainly expect that a number of us will receive these debit cards. And just because you might have received a payment in one way before, such as a paper check, doesn't mean you might not receive a debit card this time around or vice versa. Personally, I received this debit card the first time around and almost threw it away, not knowing what it was. And then the second round received a paper check. So it's just something to be aware of as we're hearing about a 3rd round of stimulus payment. And if you have questions about a card that you receive in the mail, you can certainly always call our office and we'll try and help you get to a place to verify whether what you've received is legitimate. There's also a way to check up on a payment from a stimulus payment with the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, and you see that web address there on your screen. The irs.gov/coronavirus/get-my-payment with hyphens. It's a lot to think about or write down. You can always contact our office. We'll have our contact information here at the end to ask us how to check up on a payment, whether something's legitimate, or certainly if you haven't received a payment, we can get you to the right information. It is important, of course, to know that many scammers are impersonating the government, whether it be the Treasury Department, the IRS, or even the Federal Trade Commission. The United States Federal Trade Commission, or the FTC, is our federal government consumer watchdog. And in this last round of stimulus money distribution, we heard about emails that folks received that looked like they were from the FTC or the IRS, saying that they had to pay taxes up front on this money, for example, or they click here to receive your stimulus payment, and at which point you would be taken to a site that would ask you for personal or private information, like a bank account number or something like that. Or you're paying by gift card. Of course, we'll talk a little bit more about paying by gift cards, when gift cards are not used to either receive a gift and redeem or buy for somebody to give as a gift. When they're used as a form of payment, meaning you communicate those numbers to somebody, it's certainly a red flag warning of a scam. And we heard about these being tied in to stimulus payments. But it's important to recognize these red flags, but even more importantly, and of course, we'll talk about this a number of times today too, than parsing through an email that might look like it's from the IRS or from the FTC or somewhere else, is to know that these payments just come, whether they come through the mail or they are directly deposited into our bank accounts as we might have gotten tax refunds in the past. There's not an announcement, there's not an email, there's not a phone call to us or a text message saying, well, here's your payment, or your payment's on its way, you just have to do this. There's nothing that we have to do to get this payment other than qualify under our federal government's eligibility guidelines, which are still being worked out for this third stimulus payment. They certainly aren't taxable, so there's no information that we should have to pay attention to about taxing. As I said, there's nobody texting asking us for a bank account number to deposit the stimulus payment. They are just mailing it. Some of you may remember a few years ago when our federal government decided to give us new Medicare cards that no longer contained our Social Security numbers, but a unique identifier of a Medicare number. Again, the same thing. They just mailed it to us. We received those in the mail without fanfare, without announcing, and certainly without anybody notifying us or asking us for anything ahead of time. Those are the red flag warnings of a scam. And then last but not least, on this screen, we've heard of other companies that want to give out money, and this is, of course, a scam as well. This is a transcription of a voicemail message that one of our community members received. Chad from Verizon wanted to give out $1,000 and asked you to call a number to receive it, or text your Verizon number to this phone number. Of course, this is what we call a phishing expedition to get a hold of your personal information, get a hold of you, and then have you reveal some information to a scammer or give them money in some way to get this other thing, which in this case was $1,000. Don't take that bait, as we'll talk about and show you with banking and all kinds of text messages that we're receiving now. Don't click on these links or call these folks back. There's more legitimate ways to figure out what's real out there and what's fake.
So moving a little bit away from just the current scams of COVID, a common scam that has existed and we see today, and regularly and get calls about probably on a weekly basis are kind of the prize or sweepstakes giveaway type of scams. What these are, these can take a varying approach, but essentially the scammer is asking you to pay for a prize or reimburse them in some way for a prize. So for example, they say, if you pay me $1,000 in advance, $10,000 will come your way, but that $1,000 that you pay in advance is processing and handling and takes care of our fees associated with giving you the $10,000. That is fraudulent. Similarly, they may send you may just get a check in the mail, and it may say you've won money, you have, receive this check as a rebate from something, and you get that check in the mail. It looks like a legitimate check. It has your information on it, but what it's asking you to do, instead of just saying put this into your bank account, it's saying put it in your bank account and then send us, for example, that $1,000 rebate. So you get a $10,000 check, and they say send us $1,000, and that covers our expenses or our fees, etc. You will also see on those, a lot of times it says that this is very secretive. It says, please don't tell anybody. We can't share this information with others because others aren't as lucky as you. Well, again, do prize sweepstakes exist? Yeah, Publishers Clearinghouse has been around for years, right? And that's what scammers realize. However, what does Publishers Clearinghouse want? They want nothing more than for you to tell everybody, right? Because they want people to know about it. It should be public because, again, they get some benefit from it. For example, I remember, back in the day with Publishers Clearinghouse, it was always, if you buy X number of magazines or whatever, you're entered into this prize giveaway. And so you'd see on the TV the $1 million winner getting the check at the door and being surprised at the door. They want people to know that because then they want to sell more of their product. They want more people to sign up and register. So that's certainly a red flag when you see these things saying it's a secret, please don't tell anybody. In fact, it just recently hit here in the courthouse. One of our judges that I appear in front of on a regular basis, his wife got that exact scam where a check was sent to her in her name, and it said deposit this and then send us back X amount of money. Now, you may wonder, well, aren't I still getting a benefit, right? Because if they're saying, here's a $1,000 check and I just have to send them $100, like where's the catch? Well, the catch is ultimately that it's from a fake check. It's from a fake bank account. But what the scammers understand is that some bank accounts, mine, for example, through the credit union I use, when I deposit a check, particularly if it's a somewhat larger check, let's say $1,000, they will give me access immediately before they verify the check to some percentage of that. I may have access to $200 or $300 out of that $1,000 check right away. The rest of it, I have to wait a day or two until they process the check. Well, that's exactly the scam, is that they want you to deposit it, take out that $200, $500, etc., and send it back to them. And then your bank in a day or two then tells you, hey, this is not a fake, this is not a real check, this is a fake check. And then at that point, they are charging it against your account. So now you are, even though you had deposited, for example, a $1,000 check, you took out the $200, you're now obligated to the bank for that $200 on that fake check. So that's certainly a way that these scams exist when we're talking about kind of paying for a prize or sending money back if they give you a check. The other thing that we see around these scams are kind of the giveaways or sweepstakes, where maybe it's not about money up front or sending money back, but it's a scam, as Liz indicated, around phishing. They want to get your personal information. So you'll get that text message, you'll get that email that says, hey, you won the $1 million, as you see on the bottom right of the screen. You won the $1 million, or you won, this $500 gift card to Starbucks. All you need to do is click on this link. Well, all the problems start existing as soon as you click on that link, which again, we're going to continue to reiterate, don't click on those links from unsolicited emails or from people that you don't know, because you click on that link and either one, it could put malicious software onto your computer, or two, it'll take you to some site that is then asking for your personal identifying information. So they're going to ask for your name, your phone number, your date of birth, possibly your social security number, possibly, again, this processing of, hey, you get the $500 Starbucks check, but I need your credit card information so that we can pay the $5 in shipping to get it to you. Right? Again, seems easy enough. $5 for 500 is nice enough. Well, you're not getting a card. And ultimately, it's not just that they're taking they're taking $5 from your credit card. You're giving them your credit card information. It then gives them access. They're taking a heck of a lot more than that $5. So one thing that I like to say is the old adage has been around forever. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. And that's what we see when we talk about kind of these prize sweepstakes or giveaway type of scams.
Another scam that is much at the top of our list of things we're hearing about in Community Protection Division lately are tech support scams. And these are folks that are either calling us, perhaps text messaging us, sending us an email, telling us that there's a problem with our computer or our cell phone or our devices. And of course, they are the ones who are popping up to fix it. And we can, what's there on the right of your screen is an actual pop-up of such a scam. It's called a Windows Defender alert. It might look like it's from Microsoft. It certainly is not. I think it's important to remember that unless we sign up for this kind of service, and Microsoft doesn't even offer it, it's more like something through the Geek Squad or a Best Buy or another local shop in town that offers a kind of service, we're not going to hear from a Microsoft or an Apple or a Google saying that there's a problem with our computers. They don't have a way to detect this. They might send us a message that there's a software update available, and we should certainly take advantage of those and install those when they're offered to us. But these big companies like Microsoft or Apple, Dell, IBM, places that manufacture our computers, do not have any kind of detection capability for our machine that's sitting on our desk or our cell phones and so forth to tell us there's a problem and then offering a fix. Often they want a credit card number right then and there. An email might show up in your inbox. I'm assisting a community member who called us yesterday about this very thing. It was an email that had the name Geek in it as the who it came from, but it certainly wasn't any kind of service she had signed up with. Before she knew it, they sent her another email. When she called the number on her screen, they sent her another email with a link in it, which is why we keep saying not to click on these links. When she clicked on that link, it gave them remote access into her computer, where they were able to download then her passwords that were used on it, including for her banking. They were able to access bank accounts. Luckily, she hung up on them and shut down her computer before any money was removed from it, and went straight to her bank to work out those financial issues. And we're still working through the other effects of and trying to prevent anything else from happening with the information that they may have been able to grab from her device while that link was open. So I would say that anybody who's ever asking you to remote in is a big red flag of a scam, and the answer should be no. If you do sign up for a service like something like I mentioned from a big box store or somewhere like that that is there to detect, you usually subscribe to these services. You need to know exactly what they are and are not able to do, and it's within your ability to decide whether they're able to remote in if they detect a problem. Always install and keep your virus protection software up to date, but that too shouldn't garner an email message coming to you saying there's a problem. Those are different systems, and these emails or pop-ups that are coming in, or even a phone call. Some folks report to us getting a phone call from someone identifying themselves as being from Microsoft or one of these other large computer companies, names we're familiar with. Those simply aren't the way that we are informed about problems with our devices, whether it be our computers or our cell phones or our tablets or whatnot. If we do have, and oftentimes we'll get one of these or an email or something like that and think, you know, my computer has been really slow lately, and maybe this is the reason for that problem, and I should address this. Well, sure, if your computer's been slow or it's acting differently than it had, it might be time to look into it, but it's not by responding to one of these messages, no matter how it's coming at us. We take it to a legitimate place to have a diagnostic and a repair if necessary. There simply is not that detection capability with these companies. These are scam messages, no matter how they're coming in.
So I alluded to this earlier, but with the inception of the pandemic and the coronavirus, more people took advantage of online banking. Well, because more people were taking advantage of online banking, scammers realized that and started to increase their use of online banking scams. This is not a new scam. It didn't just pop up in 2020, but it certainly has increased because they realize that people are doing things much more digitally and on the internet. So for example, you see this text message. A text message is from Chase Bank saying that your card is locked. Please call us to unlock it, and they give you a number. The problem there is you're going to call that number and they're going to ask for personal identifying information. They're going to ask for your credit card number. And at that point, you are now exposed to a scam and potentially exposed to financial liability because they start to use your information and or start charging onto your credit card. When you see something like that particular example of that text message, or even if it came in an email, what you want to do is go back to your bank. So you can either, if you're not physically going to your bank, and I understand right now during COVID-19, maybe folks aren't going into the bank as much. That's fine. But what you do have is you have your bank statements or you have your debit card in your wallet. There is a number that you can call that's on the back of what you know is legitimate and is from your bank. So for example, that hard statement that they send you, or if you even get those electronically, but you know it is from your bank and you have consistently received them, there is contact information there. Again, same thing on the back of your credit card or on your debit card. You can call that number and at that point ask if in fact your card has been locked, or if there are any concerns, and you're using a legitimate source as opposed to this unsolicited email and or text message that you receive. And I'll tell you, this becomes increasingly sophisticated. So in this text message, you know, we see just this 201 number. If it's a call, you know, sometimes folks are using sophisticated technology where they do what we call spoofing a phone number. And your caller ID may show Chase Bank and then give this 201 number. I haven't necessarily had that exact scam hit me. I will tell you I did have a Social Security scam, and I think a lot of us have seen that, where it's like, your Social Security number has been locked. Please call us. Please give us information so we can unlock your Social Security number. I don't know if that means to have my Social Security number locked, but that's what they say. But they are somewhat sophisticated insofar as when I looked at my phone, it certainly said Social Security and then gave an 800 number. So if you're just relying on that, that certainly appeared to be legitimate. So again, just because something does appear to have some legitimacy, and you may, for example, not, you know, take this text message at face value, when you get that call to your phone and it says the IRS, or it says Social Security Administration, or it says Chase Bank, that starts to give a little bit more air of legitimacy. But again, you want to be careful. So we're going to talk about ways to deal with that. And one would be not to answer that call. And you can wait for them to leave a message, or you could even just say, oh, it says Chase Bank. Let me call my bank and see why they're calling me, instead of answering that phone call. But for example, even if you did answer that phone call, and again, best advice a lot of times is not to answer unsolicited phone calls. But if you did, be careful and do not give any personal identifying information. Do not give a credit card. For example, if it's Chase Bank and they are calling you to say that there's a problem with your credit card number, they don't need your credit card number, right? Because they are the bank. They are saying, we know, Jane Doe, that this is your credit card and that there's a problem with it, and we're calling to figure that out. I've actually had that where I traveled to Florida and I got a call from my bank and they said, hey, are you in Florida? We want to make sure that somebody hasn't stolen your credit card. And I said, yes, I'm in Florida. I very much appreciate that. But that was the extent of the information I gave them. They didn't ask for anything else. And they said, thank you, Mr. Gardner-Wood. We'll make sure that your credit card works for the duration of your trip. What you're getting from the scams is, please give me your name. Please give me your date of birth. Please give me your social security number. Please give me your credit card number. Do not provide that information. Again, at that point, you should start questioning the legitimacy. And at that point, you hang up the phone and you call back to the legitimate source. You call back your bank. And I'll tell you, additionally, be careful just using what I jokingly refer to as the Google machine, right? Everybody knows Google is out there and it's great. It's a great resource. We can find all sorts of information. But if you just type in Chase Bank into Google, you don't know necessarily what number is going to come up on that. It may be a legitimate number. It may not. It may not be a number that's actually going to help. Even if it's a legitimate number, it may not help you with what you're calling for. Again, go back to what you know to be a legitimate source. And that is going to be that information from your bank that you already receive, or it's going to be on the back of your credit card that you know is from your bank and is legitimate. So looking at that, you want to make sure that you're protecting yourself, that you're either not answering that phone call, that you're not clicking on links, you're not calling back these phone numbers, but instead taking the information, calling that legitimate source, or making sure that you're not providing overtly important personal identifying information. Because again, your bank, Social Security Administration, IRS, they're not asking for that. It's the scammers that are asking for that.
Yes, and to wrap up, the other most prevalent, I'm going to stick with phone scams here in a minute, although many of ones we're talking about are also coming across in email these days too, just landing in our inboxes. But the one that we really saw a big increase in 2020 is what I call the big names. And these are phone calls or emails or text messages from places like Amazon, places where maybe we didn't shop so much before the pandemic, but really started using them in 2020. Other big names include our shipping carriers. So many more of us were shopping online rather than going to retail stores. And so there might have been a question about deliveries and things like that. So I would include UPS and FedEx and even the Postal Service in here, who are calling us to say perhaps there's a problem with a delivery or confirming an order or things like that. We're going to look at an email in just a couple minutes here that one of you sent us this morning that they received that looked an awful lot like it comes from Amazon, and we'll talk about how to deal with those. But the for starters, just to be aware that these scammers, as Christian mentioned earlier, they follow the headlines, and they knew that a lot more of us were shopping online and were banking online and so forth. And so they are impersonating these large institutions and coming at us with these questions about orders or banking or things like that. I received an email this morning from my bank, Wells Fargo, that I will guarantee you is a scam. It talks about an account that is now become inactive, something that my bank might mention to me, but this account has nothing to do with me. And I haven't gotten to the bottom of it yet, but I plan to today. And we'll talk about how to get to the bottom of those in a second when we don't exactly know whether they're legitimate or not. But in addition to these big name scams, the other government imposters, not just related to coronavirus, certainly haven't gone away. In 2020, it was those impersonating Social Security, as Christian talked about, who even overtook, it used to be IRS scammers were the top category of government scammers, but now it's Social Security. And as Christian said, they can even impersonate your caller ID to make it look like the Social Security Administration or one of these other entities is actually calling us. It's not just our federal authorities. It might be somebody local that comes across and even looks legitimate on caller ID, like the sheriff's office, calling to warn us that we ignored a jury duty notice, for example, or even a police benevolent association or something like that. It's too hard these days to be able to detect in every instance who is on the other end of that phone line. And so our advice continues to be not to pick up the phone when you simply don't recognize the number that's calling, not to pick up the phone when it says unknown or anonymous, or caller ID not available. Those are all red flags to us. But even if you got a call that says Boulder County Sheriff on caller ID, we cannot guarantee anymore that that is the sheriff's office calling. And incidentally, as relating to a jury duty notice, our sheriff's office will send a jury duty notice in the mail. If that gets waylaid or lost in the mail, or for whatever reason you don't receive it, they will simply just send you another notice in the mail. No one's calling from any of our law enforcement agencies, certainly not to threaten us, to tell us that they're coming to arrest us, or to tell us that there's a warrant out for our arrest and here's how you get rid of that. Guess what? By paying us right now. None of our law enforcement agencies or any of our government agencies, whether they be local, state, federal, anywhere, will have that sense of immediacy that you have to do something right now to clear up this problem. The other scams that are mentioned on the screen are ones that we always hear about. Certainly, we heard a lot about charity scams over the holidays when so many of us decide to give to charitable organizations. But again, we don't know who exactly is on the other end of that phone line calling. I myself had a call during the holidays from somebody representing that they were from PBS, the public television station, and telling me they had a pledge drive in effect right now, going on right now, and they wanted me to pledge right then and there and give a credit card number. It would be so easy. Well, my answer was, sure, I would love to consider to give it to PBS, but I'm going to hang up the phone and call them in the morning, and I'd love to give the caller credit for soliciting my donation. Well, what do you think happened? Click, that was it. It was a scammer. It certainly wasn't PBS, but you know, scammers might know that there's a pledge drive going on and take advantage of that fact to call us during that. The relative in trouble, it is so often a grandson or a granddaughter, a younger voice that might call us on the phone saying they're in trouble. They might be somewhere else. Don't tell mom and dad if it's an instance of a grandchild. I need money. We've even heard that folks get follow-up calls from people impersonating attorneys for this young individual saying, I have to get this person out of jail. You have to send the money for bail right away. And boy, those are hard calls to be on the receiving end of because our heart starts beating fast. We think a family member might be in trouble, and we need to take that breath and say, wait a minute, and then hang up the phone, as hard as it might be in that instance, and call a different relative, call that relative, call the police. Law enforcement certainly can assist in finding out whether that's legitimate or not, but it's important to do so not by going down the road with these scammers. Lastly, a particular online scam that we unfortunately hear about all too often is, and certainly started occurring more in 2020 as so many of us were at home, maybe not having our social interactions as we had in years past, and seeking out social friendships and relationships and gathering places online. And there are always a huge number of fake identities that are put up on our social media platforms like Facebook and WhatsApp and things like that, that we might have started to use in 2020. And even celebrities posing as people who want to be your friends. I've heard 2 reports in the past couple of weeks that Leonardo DiCaprio, the actor, has been Facebook messaging community members to ask people to be his friend, and then sending some information across to give to his charities, to send photos, all kinds of things. It's good to be aware that there are so many fakes out there. And certainly the way so many of these scammers work is to develop that friendship first and correspond with us, whether it be through the social media platform or even then texting and phone calling and so forth. And then down the road, when we have developed a friendship and trust this person and ask, a request for money might come across, but we've never met this person in person. And when it's a scam, it's not even a person behind it so often. It's scammers who are working this relationship in order to ask us for money down the road. And I think a good rule of thumb is never to give money to anybody that you haven't met in person. And certainly to recognize that ask for money might come at a time where we might already trust somebody and consider them to be our friend. But often, if we develop a friendship online, to have somebody else know about it early on, because if a request comes across for money later, that person might have a more level head about it than we might. And to say, oh, I met this person online, and isn't this funny? And, do you want to look at this kind of thing? Because then if something else occurs, a request for money for a plane ticket, for example, I want to come see you, or I need money for a new business opportunity or something like that. Another person that knows about this might be a little more objective than we're able to be when that request for money comes across.
So we've talked about some of the scams. What are some of the things, and we'll continue talking about some of the things that folks can do, but this slide is just a visual representation of some of the things that you can do. We've talked about text messages, we've talked about emails, but the phone is still the most common way that scammers try to get a hold of folks. So you see right here in the middle of the screen, don't pick up the phone. When you don't know a number, don't answer it. I do that all the time on my personal cell phone number. I'll tell you on my work cell phone number, that's a little bit harder for me to do. I will tell you, for some reason, my work cell phone number gets the most scam calls I've ever dealt with. I don't know why. It's registered to the DA's office, and you would think that people would, maybe not pick that number, but, nonetheless, I get those calls. But that also is interesting because it says, hey, my student loan debt is an issue, or my credit card payment is an issue. Well, again, it's my work cell phone number, so I can immediately say, well, this is a scam, right? Because there's no accounts associated with this cell phone number. So those are things to think about. But don't pick up that phone. That's the number one way in an AARP study. The number one way that folks can protect themselves from scams is not to answer phone calls that they don't know. In addition to that, you see some other things here. Hang up when it turns out that it's not Bank of America or Chase or whatever. Hang up when they start asking for personal information, making sure that regardless of anything, whether you answer the phone or not, you don't share your personal information. If we are talking about a text message or an email, you don't click a link. Clicking the link is always a bad idea. When we're talking about email scams, that's the number one email scam, is that there's a malicious link that they have you click, or an attachment that they have you open. Those are the things that you have to make sure that you stay away from. The other thing you see in here is this idea of take a breath. That's great advice, because it gives you that second to think about, should I share this information, and get you to some of these other things about deciding, oh, you know what, I'm taking a breath, I'm taking a step back, I'm gonna hang up the phone. I'm taking a breath, I'm taking a step back, I'm not gonna share any of my personal identifying information, or I'm not gonna pay by a gift card, because you take that second second to think about it, because what these scammers know is they want you as a captive audience, and they want to run through it. They want to get you while you're not thinking. They want to just kind of continue the conversation. They don't want you to take a second to talk to your spouse or significant other or your children. They want you at that moment to grab your credit card, to give your social security number, whatever the case may be. So if you take that breath and say, does this make sense? A lot of times that can help you. And we see a lot of these gift card scams where it's, hey, you need to pay by gift card for any number of things. There's a grandparent scam that we see where you'll get information saying that your, grandkid, and they'll have the name of your grandkid. It could be Janie, it could be whatever. They'll have the actual name for your grandkid and say that Janie is in trouble. She was on a trip in New York and she got into some trouble and she needs money to get home, or she needs money to get out of jail because she got arrested. But then they're saying, send me $500 in Apple gift cards, right? Which, first off, that idea of, is Janie really traveling? Is Janie really in trouble? You should look for the legitimate source. Call and find out, is my grandkid traveling? Is this my grandkid? Call your son or daughter to find that out. But then the next step on top of that is you should never pay anybody by gift card. No legitimate source is going to say, pay me by a gift card. Anybody that you legitimately should be paying or that you have a legitimate debt to is going to ask for payment by a gift card. So some ideas here of different things to look at. And
So yes, a couple things to be aware of. We've alluded to them already. Things to be aware of specifically relating to online scams. And the first one is what we call email phishing. The larger image on your screen here is in fact the image that was sent to us by one of you this morning. And we wanted to share that with you and talk about it a little bit. It looks like it is an order confirmation from Amazon for some computer equipment, it looks like. I believe I put in the top of the screen the actual from address, which certainly isn't a from address from Amazon, but more importantly, how to deal with this if we get this. It says that the order is going somewhere in Rochester, New York. It's certainly a fair amount of money. It will often be for hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars. And they want us, in this instance, the fine print at the bottom, if you have not placed this order, you can call to our fraud protection team, and list a phone number on the email that came and landed in your inbox. Well, certainly we would want to clear this up. We want to make sure that this isn't an order that was placed with our Amazon account, or certainly with the credit card that we might have linked into our Amazon account. It looks, there's an order number. It has plenty of indications that it's legitimate. It has frankly, some indications that it might not be legitimate, that from email address, that call to our fraud protection team. But we do not actually suggest that you call the number in the email or become a detective and do detective work by parsing through this email to think about whether it is legitimate or not. And as Christian mentioned, in both of these examples, the other one on the left is a fake email I got from Netflix. I knew immediately it was fake because I'm not the Netflix account holder in my family, so it would never have come to me. But even so, they want you to click here, or in the instance of the Amazon email, to call our fraud protection team if this is not you. Well, these emails are simply fake. Amazon has a very specific way that they have order history, and we access that by going into our Amazon account, by going to not our email, but our internet, and typing in www.amazon.com, and then logging into Amazon with our credentials, our login, and our password. Once we're there, it's very easy to see what our order history is. Amazon calls it an order history. You click up at the top right, and it will show you all of your orders. And you can look there to see if this appears. If there's a problem with an order, you can see in that message center again within your account information to see if there's a problem with any of your orders. You can track delivery through that, and you don't need to do anything with an email that looks like it comes from Amazon, including figuring out whether it really is from Amazon or not. This one, it looks pretty real. Not 100% real, but don't even try to be the sleuth here. Just go to your Amazon account. And if there's nothing appearing for this order total or anything like that, it's fine. And even if there is something about an order there, there's ways to deal with it through your Amazon account. But we would always suggest that you delete this kind of email without responding to it, without clicking anywhere in it, and without calling a number that it lists. It's too easy for these folks to make the fakes look like the reals. That's certainly the Netflix example on the left. They want me to update my account details by clicking on that red box. But the way to go about seeing if there's any problem with my Netflix account is by deleting that email and logging into my account with my own login credentials. If we get an email, say from our bank, and we don't have an online banking or a retailer, or when there's no way to look for that online, again, the tips that Christian mentioned earlier is to call a number on a banking statement or call a number on a bill that we've received. That might be for a medical provider's office, or call our doctor's office if it's a medical bill. Call a number on an explanation of benefits. Call Medicare from the number on the back of your card. There are ways to find legitimate ways to get a hold of these people. It's not necessarily that we might have an online account like we might with Amazon or Netflix or somewhere else, but we can always find a legitimate way outside of what's landed in our inbox to get a hold of these people and find out whether what this is real or fake, and then be able to do something about it that way. So we always say, go to the legitimate source and not be the detective on what this came through. Somebody also pointed out in our moments of preparing for this morning before we got together with you all, is that this actual email that was received by one of the UWC members had language on the bottom, which I unfortunately wasn't able to include on this slide. It was too small and too far at the bottom, but it was in a different language and a different alphabet, not even our American English alphabet. So other indications that these are fraud, but again, there's ways to find out from Amazon with our credentials to find out whether something is real or something is fake.
So this next one is what I would describe as sort of a combination of everything that we've talked about so far. There's the scam of sort of the email takeover. What do we mean by that? Essentially, somebody gains access to your email system and or your email contact list, and then sends information to people that you know on your behalf or pretending to be you. Now, what do? Essentially, they do all the scams or some of the scams or one of the scams that we've talked about for the last 45 minutes. It may be, send a gift card. It may be, hey, I'm in trouble and I need you to send an Apple gift card my way, or, I'm low on money, so send me something. It could be, some favor of, hey, can you give me your credit card number so I can pay this bill? Whatever it may be, it essentially works the same as the scams we've talked about. But the difference here is the initial problem is they get access to your email and or your email contact list, and then operate sort of as, and we've talked about before, that, don't click, illegitimate links or unsolicited messages. Well, the benefit here is they've taken over your email account, and so it looks like it's coming from you. And so somebody that receives it may in fact think, oh, well, I can click on the link, or I can give personal identifying information because this is Jane that's sending me this information, as opposed to it being from some illegitimate unsolicited source. So certainly that is something, if you were to receive one of these scams, what you need to think about is contacting that individual. So on the screen we have, hi, sorry to bother you. Do you have an account with Amazon? Thanks, Jim. And so if you respond and, Jim is somebody that legitimately would send you a message and say, yeah, I have Amazon. It may be, hey, can I use it? I'm having trouble with mine. I really need to order something. I'll pay you back right away. And you may legitimately trust Jim and be like, oh yeah, Jim would be fine using my Amazon account. Jim would, would pay me back right away. Well, first off, you need to think, like, is that something that Jim would do? Would he email you out of the blue just like that and say, hey, can I have an Amazon account? Can I charge something against you? Maybe not. But even if so, one of the things you may want to do is give Jim a call. Don't just respond and give personal identifying information. Give Jim a call and say, hey, I got an email from you. It seemed a little strange. It said you were asking for my credit card number or my Amazon account. Was that you? Even though it may in fact have come from the email. So again, it's that sophisticated idea of, they're getting your guard down because it is coming from Jim's email account. On the flip side, to protect yourself from this email takeover. So instead of receiving these and being on the lookout for receiving these from a friend whose email was taken over, there's some things that you can do to make sure that your email doesn't get this takeover. So one of the things that you always want to look at is you want to make sure that you're up to date on your operating system. So on a regular basis, for example, folks that have Windows-based machines, you will get an update from Microsoft and they'll say there's a critical patch. You want to install those. And I don't know if I said email. Generally, it's not an email. It just comes through your computer. It's saying there's a patch, install it. I'm sure you've all seen this. Those are legitimate and you want to stay on top of those because the reason they're sending that to you is they realize there was a vulnerability. They realize that a hacker, for example, could backdoor into your computer or could get access to something. And so that's why they're telling you this is a critical update that you need to do. You want to stay on top of those because that is going to protect your system. The other thing is you want to make sure, as we've talked about before, and I'm not going to continue to harp on, that you're not opening attachments or downloading attachments or clicking on links in emails, because what that may do, you may click on it and you may feel like, oh, nothing bad happened. Like it didn't install anything. Well, you may not know that it installed something, or it may not have taken you to any kind of site that was asking for your personal identifying information. But what it might have done is put some backdoor onto your computer so they could get access to your information, so they could get access to your email, or did send them information, although you didn't see it and it just kind of happened. The other thing that you always want to think about, and we have another slide coming up in just a couple slides, so I won't harp on it now, but with this, certainly this email takeover can happen with weak passwords. You want to make sure that your passwords are strong, that they're not being reused over and over. You want to change your email passwords or other account passwords if there is any concern for vulnerability, so that you don't have these concerns and open yourself up, or your friends for that matter, to some vulnerability.
Yes, and online, just additional tips for online shopping, because as we mentioned, a lot of us started doing this or did it more in 2020 due to the pandemic and so forth. But it's important to be alert to unfamiliar sites that you may not have shopped on before. Do your research, check retailer's name if you've never shopped with them before, and the word scam, and see what comes up. There was a Better Business Bureau study that said that 81% of people who don't do their homework on an unfamiliar shopping site end up losing out. They either don't receive the product or they lose money in the transaction and so forth. So it's our old sort of common sense tips that we must bring to online shopping as well. We talked about the big names, certainly comparison shop on prices and so forth. And then that, as that graphic on the right illustrates, check that where you're shopping is a secure website before you enter any financial information in it. It would have that locked padlock, and after the HTTP, it will have an S, which stands for secure. Something, a more general tip about shopping is not to email any financial information. Don't email a credit card number. Don't send it through regular email. The websites that have this security on them indicated by those padlocks or that S are secure websites that they have rules that they need to follow to keep your financial and personal information secure. If you send it by email, no such protections necessarily, and email is certainly a more vulnerable way to to send that kind of information than through one of these websites.
So I alluded to on the prior slide, I talked about passwords. So what are some additional steps that you can do? Certainly, I talked about the idea of software updates. You can also make sure that you have virus protection, anti-scam protection. There's a lot of products out there from reputable companies that you can find that will protect you from malware. But prevention is the key. And it starts with the knowledge that we're providing you in terms of what to do and not to do. But in terms of being proactive, one of the strongest things that you can do is having strong, unique passwords. And one of the things that a lot of sites are moving to is sort of the passphrase or a password that requires some combination of things. It may need to be more than 8 characters, and it may need to have an uppercase letter, a lowercase letter, a number, and a symbol. So for example, you see on this slide here in red, the passphrase of "I love my cat." It's easy to remember, but it's hard to hack into because you have to have the capital I on that. Instead of using an E, you're using the number 3. Instead of using the A in cat, you're using the @ symbol. You have the capital T at the end, and then you have an additional symbol at the end of the exclamation point. What you have probably already seen is that there's a lot of legitimate companies, banks, et cetera, that you will work with that will create that you need to create passwords through, that will require this sort of thing. So it may not necessarily need to be a passphrase. That's just one example of something that's maybe a little easier to remember, the "I love my cat," but with the different way of kind of spelling it and putting it in there. But even if it is just a password, it's going to require a symbol, a letter, a capital letter, a number, etc. So those things will certainly help you. The other thing that you have probably noticed, which is very helpful, and a lot of businesses, including governments, the county government, for example, in the last year just moved to this, what's called multi-factor authentication. What does that mean? That's essentially where when you put in a password, instead of just immediately going into the site, it will then send something to your phone or your email to say, hey, was this you that was using your using this login? So not only do you have to have your username and the password, you also have to have access to the cell phone number that's on record or the email that's on record. For those of you with cell phones, a good example of this is if you have an Apple or an Android phone, if you go onto, for example, the Apple website and are doing the signing up for something on the Apple website, well, you need your Apple ID and password, but then it's also going to send something to your iPhone saying, hey, there is a login attempt on a Microsoft Edge browser at this time. Do you want to authorize this? That's that multi-factor authentication. So it's protecting you additionally. So it's certainly a good way to do that. You also want to look at your privacy settings. So we talk about social media there at the bottom and those privacy settings. The reason that can be helpful is if all of your social media information is public, it's not like we think that you're putting in your social security number or credit card numbers on social media, right? We understand that you're not doing that. But for example, if it is public to anybody, what they may find out, for example, with what we call that grandparent scam, they're going to figure out who your son and daughter and grandson and granddaughter are by just looking at your Facebook account. And they will be able to make that phone call and say, hey, Jamie is stuck in New York and she needs your help and we need you to send information. I'm her buddy from college and we're here and she can't call you right now. But they're going to get enough information potentially from your social media to make that, again, seem legitimate with that sort of sophistication that we have talked about. So again, making sure that you're thinking through your information, protecting that information, being on the forefront of trying to identify some of that.
We want to spend our remaining minutes before we take questions talking about identity theft. And identity theft is a fancier term for simply somebody stealing our information rather than out and out stealing our money. And they usually steal our information in order to steal money, whether from us or from someone else. And the graph here on the right is shows an astonishing increase in identity theft, the theft of personal information, and then using it for financial gain in 2020. This is a national statistics. The increase from 2019 to 2020 was over 100%, and most of it was actually pandemic related. It was related to unemployment benefit fraud, where perhaps someone got a hold of my information, my name, maybe my address, my social security number, and used it to apply in our state or another state for unemployment benefits. And this was the leading cause of identity theft that the Federal Trade Commission heard about in 2020. I would say within our office, this has certainly continued into 2021. We have heard a number of reports from community members who might have gotten something in the mail from our own Colorado Department of Labor and Employment, whether it be a letter saying, well, here we opened your account for benefits, or maybe they received even a debit card that looks like the one below in our state. One of the ways to distribute unemployment benefits is on a debit card called a Relia card, and you see that facsimile of it on the bottom of your screen there. Or they might receive a 1099 form indicating that our Department of Labor and Employment has reported this amount of income to us, to the IRS, and we need to report it on our taxes. Without going into all of the details on what to do about that particular type of identity theft, our office certainly has a flyer on how to deal with this. Our message for today is, if you've received any of those things and didn't apply for unemployment benefits, you should give us a call. We can share information with you. We can walk you through those steps, both to report it and as well to take steps to safeguard credit, because often if somebody has a social security number of mine and might have used it to apply for unemployment benefits, they might also be using it to apply for a loan or to try to open a new credit card account. And we can help you with preventing that kind of identity theft from happening too. There are certainly other types of identity theft. In 2020, they were overshadowed by unemployment benefits, but the folks might use a social security number, for example, to file a fake tax return and try to obtain a refund. And certainly they, as we've gone over again and again today, they try and call us to get our information or to steal it from our devices through malware. And those are the examples of phishing and malware. Folks always ask me how people get our information in the first place, and that certainly a phishing attempt that we might respond to and communicate some kind of information is one way. Malware, it might be another way, but there certainly have been some very notable data breaches where we actually don't have control over the information that's stored. It's stored in a third party, perhaps a credit bureau or something like that, and that information is hacked. And while we might not have control over that, as we might when we say don't reply to one of those emails or don't click on those links, we can certainly take steps to prevent anything more from being done with our information.
So we've talked about some of this, and I won't spend a bunch of time because I want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions and answers. And I know we have some in the chat and as well as some we got in advance, but some steps to prevent some of the things that Liz talked about, and I've alluded to these, and Liz has alluded to these throughout the presentation, but here they are in kind of a concise format. sharing as little information as possible, monitoring your credit report. You get a free credit report that you can do. You go to the annualcreditreport.com website. You can get a free credit report. Review that. Make sure that there's not accounts on there that don't belong to you, that you never signed up for. Similarly, monitor your bills, your bank accounts, the statements that you receive from your credit cards. I'll tell you, I'm not great about that. I've tried to be better the more I do this job, and I see some of these scams and realize people have lost money and literally had no idea until maybe a year later they realize, wait, why is my credit card statement $2,000? I didn't use it that much. So I try to be better on that, but that's definitely a good way to do it. So you can catch it right away. You can deal with it. You can dispute it. You can also consider a fraud alert on your credit report. If there has been some concerns on the past, you could do a credit report freeze. So if you're in a situation where you know that you're not opening any accounts, that you're not using, you're not going to be opening a credit card or anything like that, and there's no reason somebody would need to check your credit report, buying a new car, etc., then you can put a freeze on your credit report so nobody has access to that. So nobody can open an account in your name without you knowing. Be careful with mail. Sometimes doing it inside the post office or putting it into a certified sort of post office receptacle, as opposed to just putting it in your outgoing mailbox, as you see on the right side of the screen there. Sometimes people are, getting information. They can open your mailbox, they can get information. That's something to consider. Making sure that your documents are stored safely, or that if you're throwing documents away, that you're shredding those, that those aren't just sitting in your trash and somebody can get access to it. Sometimes going paperless is a way to deal with that. That way you don't have that information laying around. And we've talked about this repeatedly, but I'll say it one last time. Don't pick up that phone call from somebody that you don't know, or if it's a blocked or unknown number. Wait for them. If it's somebody that needs to get in touch with you, my policy is always they're going to leave a message. They're going to leave a message. They're going to send a text message. If they need to or want to get in touch with me, they can do so. And then I'm happy to chat with them. But not picking up that number stops a lot of these concerns, as we talked about from that AARP study.
Great, so thank you. I encourage all of you to call us with questions or email us. There's our email address. The DA Consumer goes directly to our division that you see there in the middle of your screen. Christian and my direct email accounts are listed there as well. It's basically our first initial of our initial of our first name and our last names, and then at bouldercounty.org. The number for our division is there, as well as our phone numbers. It's important to call. I think if something comes across that you're not sure whether it's legitimate or not, we can certainly help figure that out. And also important to spread the word. Education is the best way we have to know about these scams, because if knowing about them, we prevent them from happening to us and to our friends, our families, and our neighbors. So thank you so much. We'll spend the rest of our time together here taking your questions. And Christian, you want to talk about the first question or two that we've received?
Sure. We have some questions or thoughts that were given to us by some of your organizers that we'll talk about. But first, since we have these live questions, I'd like to jump into those. So we have one here that says there was a blood test at a local hospital center, and they took a lot of information. Driver's license, Medicare, supplemental card, inquired about date of birth, address, et cetera, usual questions. But the concern is then asked for a social security number. And this person indicates they didn't give it and said that they had all the necessary information. That is 100% right. She said, why are they doing this? Is it a scam? To be honest with you, if it's at a local hospital center, if it's a reputable facility, it's probably not a scam. That being said, you 100% did the right thing by not providing it. You're right. The person did not need that. The healthcare profession, as well as, most professions, have gone away from needing a social security number. They use other identifying personal numbers. So for example, when you gave your date of birth and your address and your name and your Medicare card, that is more than enough for them to be able to do the blood work and do the testing that is required. So I can't tell you why they're doing it. Sometimes it's, some facilities are better than others in terms of moving into the new world of not using this information. Some still require it. I'll tell you, for example, I went and got my teeth cleaned a week or two ago, and my dental insurance, they have not updated to random numbers like most health insurance have. And so for me to get dental service through my dental insurance company, through Delta Dental, I did have to give my social security number. So unfortunately, there are some areas that are behind the times around this, and I suspect that's what you encountered there with that local hospital center. So although maybe not a scam, you 100% did the right thing by saying you don't need that information. You have plenty. You have my Medicare card. So great work there with that. For Joyce Spencer, talked about, which is a great point, that you can see where an email came from, who the sender was, when you see some of these emails. So for example, we talked about the Amazon email, we talked about the Netflix email. It's 100% right. If you look at where that email is coming from, and sometimes if you just look at the name itself, like on my phone, for example, on my phone, it may just say Netflix, right? But if I actually click on the name of, who it's coming from, and I click on that Netflix, it'll bring it open and it'll say, 1234 ABCD at some random email account. Joyce is right that you can see there that it's phony. On the example that we received as it related to the Amazon one just this morning that we got, I think from your president, in fact, where she got the email was, if you looked at that, if you looked at the email sender, who it was received from, it clearly was not Amazon, right? The email itself looked very legitimate, but Liz had on the top of that slide, you could see that the email was some random, email address with random characters. So you're right, that is right. In terms of how to send those directly to junk mail, so certainly with a lot of email providers or on your cell phone, you can mark things as being junk. You can mark them as spam, and they should go to your junk email or your spam folder. I'll tell you the problem ultimately is, in Joyce's example, she says she gets several emails a day from email admin. Although maybe the name is email admin, what your email provider is going to look for is who it's coming from. And if that email admin is from multiple different domains or multiple different email addresses, just because you have marked one as junk doesn't mean that all of them are going to go into your junk mail. But certainly I do encourage you to mark them as junk mail when you see them. And there is the option of marking just the email address itself as junk or spam versus the domain name. I'd encourage you to do the latter. The domain name itself is going to be the concern, and that would stop you from getting any emails from that domain. Now, I will tell you, we got to be careful with that, because if the scammer is using, say, and not that many people use AOL.com anymore, but let's say it's AOL.com, that's the domain, it is going to block anything from AOL.com or gmail.com, et cetera. But on a lot of these phony emails, what you will actually see is it is not from that sort of common email provider. It's from some, provider that they have set up that they're working through. So those you could certainly do the domain and set them, and hopefully that sends more of those to junk. Liz, if you want to, I'll leave it over to you.
There's a question here about more old-fashioned mailboxes, snail mail as people like to call it. And it's about locked community mailboxes that might be common in an HOA, for example, where a mailbox for a number of individuals is set in concrete with keys provided for homeowners, and just asking if those kinds of setups are wise. Well, certainly our tips about mail, United States Postal Mail have to do more with outgoing mail that you might be sending. Say you're paying a bill and you want to mail it. More of us during the pandemic might have been tempted to put it in an outgoing mailbox at our homes and putting up that little red flag. And the same thing, if those HOA or other community mailboxes have an outgoing mailbox, we would encourage you not to perhaps use those if they could be rifled through by anybody, but in fact, mailing them at a post office mailbox, or even better, inside a post office, just in a mail slot there, because then you actually know that it cannot be accessed by anybody else besides postal office workers or employees, and nobody can go through it. Provided homeowners each have their own keys for incoming mail in those boxes. That seems to me to be a secure way to receive mail. But our outgoing mail, especially when it contains sensitive financial information, is something we ought to be paying more attention to. There's another question. I hear I live in Westminster. Do I still call you with questions? You can always call us with questions. We will be happy to disseminate our information. Our flyers are also on our website. If you go to the Boulder District Attorney's Office and then to the Community Protection webpage. So yes, but you can always call us with questions. We encourage you to do so.
And we're always happy to be a resource around that. If something, for example, were to have happened and you were defrauded in some way, then what we would do is figure out who to put you in contact with in Westminster, because we couldn't necessarily prosecute it ourselves or refer you to local law enforcement here in Boulder. But more than happy to be a resource generally around prevention, or even a resource if something happens to get you in touch with the right person.
Yes, there's another question about making our contact available, and we will certainly give that slide to your membership as with our phone numbers and our email addresses. We are happy to share that information so that you all have it in any way that makes sense for you. We did receive there's one more question here about what specific security somebody should buy. And I know that we can't recommend a certain type of security other than to recommend that security is there. And Christian, I don't know if you want to comment about Apple products and security.
Sure. So I will tell you, Apple generally, and again, take it with a grain of salt, because it's not like people with Apple products can't be scammed. Apple generally does do a better job in terms of not allowing folks into the devices. So for example, those back doors that we talked about, Apple tends to do a little bit better job than, say, a Windows-based machine in terms of somebody being able to backdoor into your device. The problem with that, however, is none of that matters, whether it's an Apple device, an Android, or just your Windows laptop, if you click a link, or if you download malicious software, or if you do any of those things that we've talked about. And that's where other products that are out there, you could go to Best Buy, you could go, wherever else, and they can talk to you about your individual needs. But there's Sophos, there's McAfee, there's probably 3 to 5 extremely well-known, very popular security software companies that, realistically, any of them probably do what you need for what we're talking about in terms of our purposes. But I would refer you to, maybe go into the store and they'd be able to help you there.
Well, I think we've kind of run out of time, and I think you got most of those questions answered. I just wanted to thank you both so much for this incredibly comprehensive information. I really feel 100% sure that many of us are going to be so much better protected because of the information that you taught us today. And thank you for your openness and your availability to the entire community, and for your ongoing support of the community. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Norma.
Yeah, thanks for giving us the opportunity, and please feel free to reach out. We'll provide, as I said, our contact information, as well as ways to report scams and so forth to you to disseminate to the membership. So thank you again.
Yes, we will make sure that that's available.
Great.
Great. Have a great day, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So just wanted to give you just a quick look at what we've got planned for next year. We've got 3 really good presenters lined up. One is going to talk about female composers. and how they managed to make their way in the musical world, which was very male dominated. On November 9th, stories of Colorado women, a lot of women who have made incredible contributions to the state. And you're going to hear about all of them. And then on January 11th, women in science navigating a man's world. Women scientists were usually told that they were not capable of achieving to the same level as their male counterparts. So we're going to talk about the obstacles that they faced and all the accomplishments that they made. So we hope you'll put these dates on your calendar, even though they're a long time from now. Please make sure you join us then. So at this point, I'm just going to turn it over to Janet, our president, to say goodbye. And are you there, Janet?
Here. And I want to add my special thanks to today's guest speakers for a most timely and informative presentation. And meanwhile, I wish everyone well, stay safe, and I know you'll put to use what you learned today. Goodbye.